So we have a quorum of the board present. So I'm going to call, Chris, are you ready? Okay. I'm going to call the meeting to order at 6:01. We have Chris as our minute taker. We do not have Zoom or ATV tonight, sorry, Zoom. So we're going to record it on the Zoom link. So if you're going to speak, you really need a microphone or nobody on the Zoom call will hear. And I did use the speakers list tonight, and I have 2 people signed up in the building here, and then we'll go to the Zoom crowd. And before we get started on public comment, Kristen's going to walk us through some guidelines.
Good evening. So we're going to go over our norms a little and then public participation protocol. So all ideas get a fair hearing. Each person gets a chance to talk. Speak your truth. It's okay to disagree and no personal attacks. And as we found out last time from our lawyers, speakers may talk about their children, but we'll have to turn off the Zoom feed and stop taking minutes. And school board members may not ask questions about specific children or staff. So in addition to those, we have specific protocols for the public comment portions of the meeting to help keep the meeting on track. We do have a lot of important stuff to do tonight. So if you're on Zoom and you want to make a comment, please stay muted during the business part of the meeting until you're called on to speak during public comment. And we'll have you raise your digital hand if you can, or your real hand if you can't find that. Be called on to speak. We'll have someone monitoring Zoom participants so we can see and call on everyone who wants to speak. When you're called on, please share your name and town before making your comment. So you have that for the meeting minutes. Again, on Zoom, keep your microphone muted during the meeting, please, unless it's your turn to speak. These same guidelines are in place for personal, in-person public comment. We'll give the microphone to you, and please state your name, your town, and then your comment. And if anyone speaks out of turn, we'll remind people to let the speaker please finish. Oh, page 2. It's very short. And this is a public meeting. And the board would like to hear what everyone has to say. If at any point comments become personal or negative towards staff, administrators, board members, or anyone here, then we'll end the meeting. One more thing, if specific questions are raised by the board or the public tonight that our administration is not able to answer, is Liz here? Then I will write those questions down and they can be revisited at our next meeting or in a follow-up communication. Thank you.
Patrick's going to try to because it's on his computer. All right, the first person on the speaker list tonight is Sarah Mangini.
Well, hi, as you may know, I'm Sarah Mangini, a 4th grade teacher at Bristol Elementary. And tonight I'm here to talk really briefly about a pretty boring topic. It's not on the agenda around facilities and it's not related to safety concerns. Just a quick update on healthcare negotiations at the state level with teachers. I said I was going to go as quick as I can. So as you likely know, at the state level, it's being negotiated between a group of educators or people representing educators as well as state employees union, I believe, and then the Vermont School Boards Association. And each group made a last best offer in late October. A neutral fact finder named John Cochran issued a report a little while later and noted it sounds like I think the last best offer on each side agreed upon a 20% premium share from the employee portion of the premium. That's for licensed educators, licensed teachers. That would last the duration of the 3-year agreement. For support staff, I believe it's been recommended a 1% increase per year, not to exceed a total of 20%. I think it sounds like different districts had different percentages for support staff. So the idea is to get to the 20%, but not too much all at once. The fact-finding report recommended no increase in out-of-pocket expenses for support staff.
I think there might be recommended increase for licensed educators, but recommended no increase for support staff. And then there was also another issue being discussed was around what's considered a full-time employee. How many hours for purposes of health insurance. Because I think in some districts, full-time week, like for a paraeducator might be 37 hours. In a different district, it's 38.5. And I guess there needs to be, increase, of course, on what counts as full-time for health insurance. Now, let's see, following the fact finder's report, there was a 4-day arbitration hearing in November, like the first 4 days of November. And each side presented their arguments before a panel of arbitrators. By mid-December, the arbitration panel will make an award, a final award, in which they will choose one or the other last best offer. And if I'm telling you things that you already knew, I apologize for taking your time, but I just wanted to make sure everyone knew what was going on. Where we're at with that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next one is Abby.
Hi, I really didn't know what I was getting into when I name on that list, but my connection with the schools of this district is before COVID, I was a substitute teacher that worked all the schools every grade level since 2012. So I have some concerns about where this district's going in a lot of ways. So this is my first meeting, and I hope it's the beginning of a regular thing for me. I'm in Starksboro, so I'm really concerned about Robinson at this point. I'm sure everybody is. So that's basically all I have to say, is that I'm feeling I need to get more involved. So thank you for your time.
So we're gonna go to Zoom now, and I see Nancy's hand up.
Hello, are you calling on me?
Yes, she is, Nancy, and I thought I had you patch into the sound system here. Let me try again.
Patrick, I know you're working on the sound, yes?
Yes, I am.
I would say that it's very hard to hear people who are in the cafeteria there with you. I can hear you very well. So I wonder if proximity to the computer where you are is a key to being able for the people who are on Zoom to hear better. In any case,
we're trying to mic to be able to project to everyone online, but seems to not be working.
let me know when you'd like me to begin.
Is that hearing? Can you hear it okay? I think we're ready, Nancy.
Okay, can everyone hear me? I can't see them. No. Okay, okay. My name is Nancy Cornell, and I'm from Starksboro. And I just wanted to say a couple of things during visitors' business tonight. I'm so hopeful to see in tonight's agenda that you're planning to clarify your views as a board on who has the authority to take action on school closure, on school repurposing, and school grade configuration. It's such an important action that you're contemplating tonight. I do hope that in taking the action tonight, you will affirm, support, and ensure the legal rights that were intentionally defined in the Articles of Agreement that were written by the Addison Northeast Supervisory Union Act 46 Study Committee, and were approved not only by the Vermont State Board of Education, but also by the voters of each of our 5 towns when they voted in 2016 to consolidate our school districts. Articles 14 and 16 in those articles of agreement clearly ensure the right of towns to vote on whether their schools will be closed. And those articles also affirm that K-6 students will attend the elementary school in the town in which they live unless their school is closed. If the board has compelling reasons to recommend that an elementary program is closed, or to recommend configuring the grades in an elementary school, surely the board should be able to make the case to voters and should let the voters decide. If the recommendation does indeed make educational sense, if it's a recommendation that does have truly the best interest of the children at its core, then it should be an easy sell to voters. So I hope the board will take action that really supports the legal rights as they're defined in the Articles of Agreement. Thanks for listening.
There's no. Where are you seeing it? Oh. Go ahead, Brenda.
Just a comment about one of your agenda items, and that is I am hoping to hear under agenda item number 3, perhaps part D, how each board member will best represent the voters in their town, who are sometimes called the owners, especially on topics where the voters are generally in disagreement with the vision that the central office has for the school district. Thank you.
Nancy, just to be clear, that hand that's still up is from before, right?
My name is Shauna Crystal. I am a parent of an individual at Bristol Elementary, and I recently became aware of some policies that are not in compliance, unfortunately. Our policy at MAUSD Board hazing, harassment, bullying was last reviewed in 2018, and the laws became amended in 2020 that made substantial changes that allowed the definitions of certain things to be added to that, such as sexual harassment and sexual violence are now considered to be sex-based discrimination. There have been reported cases that the school unfortunately is not following through with their obligation to report to both the parents, to law enforcement if necessary, to DCF if necessary. All individuals and employees in schools are mandated reporters. But unfortunately, things are not being followed up on according to the laws. This has been an issue, and it's something that has to change. Additionally, there is not enough education in our schools for sex education to even tell the teachers, the kids, the parents, what is appropriate and what is not. It's something that isn't acceptable, and this will continue to happen. We have to do something to help our children. There's protections in place, such as who can we report things to? There's supposed to be a district coordinator that anyone, whether you are a parent, a child, a teacher, that can go to safely and report events and every complaint. Under the new law, every single complaint must be responded to. You cannot ignore them. These things are not happening. And thus, for additional safety, the district coordinator cannot have any bias or conflict of interest. There must be a separate investigator. And if that district coordinator is involved in investigating still, there's a separate decision maker. This prevents people from being ignored.
because they are. And we all know this. That's why movements are in place for this, to stop people from being ignored, stop our kids from being ignored. Things like this have to change. Bristol Elementary follows policies that are allowing these things to happen. Currently, as it's posted, the MAUSD policy is from 2018. It says it right on the website. This was amended on August 14th, 2020. This became effective, and we are 100% out of compliance. And I would hope that as a community and as a board, that we will do what's right and allow the support that needs to happen to ensure if they need help with giving more attention at the schools that allow these education to be put in place, that will do that. But we have to do something. All right. Okay. Move on down to our consent agenda. Andrew moves to approve consent agenda. Sarah? All those in favor of approving the consent agenda, please say aye. Aye. Rob? Rob, do you have a? And Steve, okay, all right, motion passed. So, next item is under board management and governance is a discussion on the definition of closure, repurpose, reconfiguration, and who has the authority to take action. Tonight, we're going to make another attempt at this conversation. Last month, Andrew came forward with an idea that Krista, Patrick, and I thought might be a useful way to move us along in this discussion. So Andrew is going to lead us through this exercise. We have a diagram to share originally on the screen, but now Patrick's computer is being used, so we have hard copies, and it was attached in the minutes. So here is our plan to structure the discussion. Andrew will introduce, and board members will have 5 minutes to review the chart on their own, jot down any notes and capture your thoughts, and then pair up with your board member peer evaluation buddy. But we're all split up, so I don't think that's gonna happen. So we just pair up with another partner tonight. And take 3 minutes each to share your thoughts, and then all of us will come together to discuss the thoughts raised for about 30 minutes. So I'm going to pass this over to Andrew.
Okay, so it looks like everyone has it. So this was just my attempt after probably, well, it's an hour and a half unwieldy discussion that a couple months ago we were having, and we were all over the place. Since we're an educational institution and I happen to be a visual learner, I decided that maybe what I was going to try to do is encapsulate what I was hearing into a visual diagram so we could a little more concisely and efficiently move through this discussion. So in the upper left-hand corner, start here, is repurposing the same as school closure as defined by Act 46. So if for you that's no, it's not. There's no gray area, then you mark yourself down. The school board retains authority to repurpose, but while the board can repurpose, should the board give the authority to the town to make yes or no, and then that will take you to the right place. Across the top, you could say yes, and then it's a clear stop, and the town's supposed to decide. And then through the middle there is this idea of repurposing versus grade reconfiguration. So it's not really clear cut on either side of it. You might have some thoughts individually, and then we can discuss them there. So I think it's fairly straightforward, just an attempt to visually move us through the process.
Got a question.
Sure.
So in your stack here, done and friends, as defined by Act 46, I'm not clear if the act actually defines these terms.
No, so Article 14, I don't think said anything about repurposing. It just says school closure within 4 years.
Okay, so Act 46 is our bylaw, or our board bylaws, and the act of the state.
Right, so I was just looking at our articles of agreement, and Article 14 said that schools could not be closed within the first 4 years, and then after that, it could be done without a majority vote of the town in which the school was. Thank you.
Take about 5 minutes. Or 3 minutes to jot down any thoughts.
Patrick, I just want to say that it's very hard to hear anyone who's speaking in that room unless they put the mic right close up. That seems to work, but it's very hard to understand what people are saying.
I might add that the camera angle, Patrick, you're putting in, well, what the camera is catching. We basically can't see half of the board members. Thank you.
Yeah. Unfortunately, this is the best we have to work with tonight in terms of camera angle, and we'll try to be better about the mic.
Thanks.
So let's kind of come back together. I passed out this little lizard brain document. The tool we've used in our past work with the mediators around negotiations, and way back 5, 6 years ago with the relationship by objective training. And it just gives you some thought about problem solving and listening. And so it's there to just kind of have in the back of your mind as we're about to open to a bigger discussion. So at this point, let's all talk together and yeah, we'll pass it around. So I want to just start.
So I just told Dawn that I thought that the purple repurpose would make sense more to call it reconfiguration. I think that's confusing because we were calling the innovation centers repurposing, and it seems like grade reconfiguration is different than that, because there would still be children in the building on a regular basis, right? And other than that, I mean, what are we supposed to be saying what our positions are on things, or just whatever comes to mind?
I could say something about the chart. Sorry. Hey, Andrew, I'm also a visual learner, so I appreciate that the graphic. My sense, though, is I wonder whether we're making sort of a mountain out of a molehill here, and whether or not we even need to sort of follow one of these paths on this diagram. Because I frankly don't think we have to decide any of these things that are on the diagram. Because it seems to me under the Act 46, either we have the authority, say, to repurpose, we don't have the authority to close. Either we have the authority to repurpose, or we don't have the authority to repurpose. If we don't have the authority to repurpose, then obviously we're not going to do anything. And so no harm, no foul, we'll move on. And if there's a proposal to repurpose, it goes to a vote. On the other hand, if we do have the authority to repurpose, then it seems to me that there's nothing in the Act or in the Vermont Code that I know about that says that we have to exercise that authority. And given the fact that this issue has essentially torn apart much of our community, with Lincoln moving to withdraw and with Starksboro threatening to withdraw. It seems to me that our best course of action, at least in my view, was simply to say that we're not going to significantly alter these schools or close them without a vote. We don't have to, as I said before, even if we have the authority to do that, there's no obligation to exercise it.
So where I go from that comment is, grade reconfiguration and repurposing. I think it's been really clear lately how much what goes on at one school and affects our abilities to be able to or not be able to do something at another school. Being financially intertwined, we are also programmatically, and services are also intertwined amongst our schools. So if we were going to do, or if we looked at these proposals and whether it was grade reconfiguration or innovation center repurposing in any way, I think that affects us all and affects us all deeply. And I think a district-wide vote on either of those would be that would be the way I would like to see it go.
I struggle with having a town close a school arbitrarily on its own. Not sure what this is talking about. I don't believe, the Article 16, which by the way is policy, is not, it was not a voted warning or section of warning. The intent and the discussion surrounded around that at the time it was written are totally different than what we're looking at today. And that whole commentary is used for a position. I think it's unfortunate that as we consider this, and then we've actually got item on the agenda further about no comment without proposals. As we consider this, if we were to say that we're not going to do anything that a town doesn't want through goals or whatever the other action is, we are effectively taking proposals off the table tonight by saying.
I'll go and make my comments. My position has always been clear that taking all the students from school and moving elsewhere to me equals a closure and leads to a decision by the town. I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that it's already decided that proposals won't happen just because it has to go to a town. It means you've already assuming what the vote will be. So I think it sort of jumps ahead of that. But I do also think that we're dealing with the limited issue here of what closure is or not. And we still have a lot of work to do as a board on just what are the proposals, because it's this kind of the cart before the horse. So my view is really, in my opinion, that's more clear. The other question about K through 4, K through 6, grade reconfiguration, is that not a closure? It's not a closure. Does it require town involvement? Again, to me, I would need more information, but I think a reading of the articles, and I have them up again, and even if they're advisory, the other articles, they provide the context for the rest of all the other articles in the act. Also, I was trying to find the paperwork that we received from the board, Bill Muth, when he gave us advice on this issue of repurposing and closure. And even though it was an executive session, we were clear that we could share information out. I'm trying to find that paperwork because there were best practices or interpretations of what repurposing and closure were that were provided to us. I'm trying to find them again. And in that paperwork, I recall that moving grades, like going K through 4 instead of K through 6 was considered more repurposing. And that was in the paperwork provided to us. And then the question was whether if you go beyond that, it becomes a closure. So just putting that out there.
Thank you, Andrew, for making this. My stance is that if at any point a decision radically changes the ability of a kid in a town to be educated in that town, then I think the town should have a say.
So I spent 3 or 4 hours yesterday reviewing Act 46 study committee videos. Really, I didn't have anything better to do. And very interesting to watch conversations 5 years ago and think, oh, if you only knew, what would you be discussing now? But I think there was some anticipation of that. I mean, there was discussions around Article 14 and whether that should also close, including repurposing, and some discussion about, how that limits the board. Once we pass this, the board might having to contend with something years down the road that we can't foresee, and we would want the board perhaps to have some flexibility. And that sounds like I was looking through many videos trying to find out context around Article 16 about limiting folks then just having the ability, especially folks with needs, to move kids from their current town to another school in the district, so more of a school choice. Lots of conversation about school choice. We're talking about same things with different terms. I think to Sandy's point, cart before the horse, perhaps. I guess right now where I want to add is I'd like the board to maintain the ability to purpose, at least through the presentation of the 11 students and proposals, so that we, if the community says, wow, this is really a thing we love, and the board says that we have the ability to purpose, then we can do that. That's something the community likes. And knowing that even if the board maintain the right to repurpose right now, that doesn't mean when we hear stuff from the 11 saying we don't have
I'd just like to respond to that. Andrew, I mean, I strongly disagree with that position on, maintaining the authority to repurpose schools, because I think that if the programs that are presented to the Levinson mechanism and procedure, if they make sense to the community, then I think we should put it to a vote. I think that the community decide, because I don't see moving forward with Levinson and articulating that we support towns to vote for what happens in their schools are mutually exclusive. It's a good project. It means closing a school or repurposing it or reducing the number of classrooms in the school. And we, as a board, the administration, as an educational institution, can make that sell. I think we put it to the voters. The voters pay our salaries. They, we adhere to a governance policy that requires that we are answerable to our constituents. And our constituents are the taxpayers, not 13 of us sitting around the table. So I strongly support. I think my previous articulation, we don't even have to go down this road. I still believe very strongly in it, but certainly I think that a resolution on our part tonight to say that if a school is closed or repurposed or some other significant way changed, then our constituents, the taxpayers, have a right to vote on it.
Rob, do you want to go?
Yeah, sure. Can you hear me? Excuse me.
Here.
Is that yes?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. It sort of, I'll be honest, it sounds like a tin can when it's coming from the room. I want to say thanks to Andrew for putting this chart together to begin with. It definitely helps me. You know, I think we're focusing on the wrong words a little bit in regards to closure, repurpose, grade configuration. You know, I've been looking at the Articles of Agreement, and when voters voted on them, I think about what elementary education meant and what it still means. And it means a K-6 educational experience in the school, in the town of which those children live. And any alteration of what a K-6 elementary education experience looks like, I agree with Brad. I think that needs to go to the voters. And that puts the onus on the school board to sell the reason why it's better for their educational journey to not go to K-6 grade in the town in which they reside. And that's just, I think, pretty straightforward. I think you start, you know, when you think about Patrick's proposal or even MAUSD Reimagined, you know, it's not even the idea of repurposing, it's closing that K-6 elementary education experience, whether it be in 3 towns regarding Patrick's proposal or in Bristol regarding MAUSD Reimagined, and then repurposing. So it starts with closing. So I think it's pretty cut and dry. I think we have to think about what people voted on when they voted, which was that their elementary school is a K-6 experience. And anything that doesn't look like that, we send it back to them in their individual towns to make that decision. And if, as a board, we decide that that's what we should do, then we need to explain why that is. We're asking them to change what their elementary education experience looks like for their kids in their town. Thank you.
Steve, do you want to go? Steve Rooney?
Yeah, thanks, Don.
Ooh, Steve, you're going to have to speak up.
So what I think the board has the authority to do legally, and what the voters believe they voted for, I think I agree with Rob. I think they're kind of 2 different things. I think when the committee placed Article 16 outside of the warrant articles, they did so under the advice of counsel at the time. And Article 16 being outside of the warned Section 1 articles that were on the ballot, very specifically in Vermont, in the statutes that form the body of Act 46, places the authority to modify or change those articles solely at the discretion of the board. So I do believe, as it's written legally, and I think it was a very conscious, deliberative step to place Article 16 outside of the warrant articles for that very purpose. Now, I don't think that most of the voters, including myself at the time, understood anything about, you know, the article that's not even published in the final report, the article in state statute that actually defines that legal authority split. I think people haven't read it. They don't understand why there is a authority split at all. It doesn't seem to be described anywhere in the final report, except for a vague sort of warning by the minority report that that article being outside of the warrant articles was going to be problematic down the road. And I think it's proven to be. And I think that voters in general have the impression that Rob stated, that they think that there isn't a split in the authority, that there is basically, if you're going to do something different with the schools, then a town gets to vote on that. Whether it's, you know, whether in fact the legal structure actually says that or not, I think that's the impression that the voters have. And it's sort of been my position up to this point that what really needs to happen is that the Articles of Agreement need to be clarified in general, that they need to be brought back to the people who created them and agreed to them in the first place, which is the entire district, and given a chance to say, did you really intend for the board to have this separate authority, or did you intend for this really to be, you know, a district-wide vote or a vote by each town as they are affected by the proposed plan? So, you know, if it comes down to trying to make folks feel like they have a voice, and the only expeditious way to do that is to take Brad's approach and basically just give them the assurance that we're not going to do anything without a vote by the town, I would say I would probably agree with that, simply because I think there's a lot of, I think from what I can tell, folks don't understand that the board has this authority, and I think it makes them angry to think the board would use that authority. So, you know, I would certainly go along with somebody, if the board felt they wanted to make a statement to not use the authority one way or the other without a vote by the town. I think there's a better way legally to kind of clean this up and make it more understandable to the entire district down the road for, you know, legal purposes, and for the next time we have to have this discussion, it's more clearly defined, you know, in legal statute rather than, you know, a board motion at a meeting. But that's my sense.
Thank you, Steve.
It's turning red. Okay. So I think whatever we do, that there needs to be some kind of public consensus at some point, or discussion about how small is too small for a school for academic and social opportunities, how expensive is too expensive for a school, and maybe that's where we figure out at some point down the road, those are going to be important questions. The other carve out that I would like to see is for 6th grade. I've talked to a lot of middle school teachers. They're saying, just in regards to what's going on, they're saying that, you know, 6, 7, 8 is a true middle school. You can have a real program. And I just wanted to share that I think 6th grade classes in a 5, 6, I know London has all 5, 6s. I don't know about the other schools, does not serve the needs of some 6th grade students at all. To the point where I've had teachers cry and apologize to my husband and I for not being able to meet the needs of my 6th grade student. I had one student who spent at least half of each day in the hallway doing independent work, because teaching the low end of 5th grade and the high end of 6th grade is really tricky, as any teacher knows who has a class with a large range of academic needs. So I would like to create a carve out for what if we come to certain conclusions here, that 6th grade could be moved to the middle school without a vote of the towns. I think it's best practice. And I think in this district, we do not enough address the learners who are maybe more advanced in each class as much as we need to. In fact, I think we've been moving the other way towards not addressing those children's needs enough. So I just want to speak to that and have some kind of carve out for 6th grade, and that would be a change that could be at the discretion of the administration. That's just my opinion. Thank you.
I very much agree with Kristen in the fact that at some point we're here and having this conversation because it's real. We can't maintain the status quo forever. And so we need to have some ability to be flexible at some part of our educational program. I actually appreciate the flow chart because I've been pretty involved in this for a long time. I'm part of all the conversations in Act 46. The intent of Act Article 14 was about closure and not about repurposing. And so I think that's what Andrew is trying to display, is that your definition of repurposing is different, and we might need to be open to alternative forms, not just of educating kids in a specific town, but of trying to make sure that when we go to repurpose, or if we do repurpose or grade configuration, that we have a lot of options that are in best educational practice, as Kristen is saying. I also think we need to be really careful about when things get too small or too expensive, it really becomes extremely inequitable to the other communities or students in other towns. They can't have any of these things because we need to maintain the funding for something that we're kind of held, I don't want to say hostage with, but a little bit. So I totally agree that we need to be really thoughtful about this, and that we are not looking to have control, but that we're looking to make really good decisions. And I still just worry about our inability to make the decisions if they've already been made for us. And I am open to some iterations on how we could work with this.
So I wanted to give everybody a chance to speak before I offered some information that I received. I did speak with board counsel about whether the board could delegate its authority to the voters around the question of repurposing. And what board counsel said was, while you could delegate that authority, it would only be advisory, because under Title 16, we hold the authority to determine the use of a school in our district. So she is willing to provide an official response. I just asked a question because I was on a call with her. So I can read you what she sent. It's 3 pages. If you want to hear it word for word, I can read it, but it's not her official. She can and would give us an official statement if that's what the board requested. I didn't take that further. I asked her just in general.
It's red. But you can still hear me. Well, just on that, Dawn, I was thinking, before we get too down a path of splitting legal hairs, I'm imagining maybe we could decide as a board that we would hold a vote, take that as advisory, and commit to doing what the vote indicated without abdicating our responsibility. Like, I guess I'm just, what I don't want to do right now is argue that point, because I'm not sure that's really productive for us right now. But maybe it is, and if other people feel that way, we can do that. I don't think that's productive. But what I was going to say about all of these the bigger conversation is that I think I'm on a similar mind frame as Sarah and Kristen in terms of, wanting to be a little more clear about what guardrails or parameters we might put around changing some aspects of our programming while still allowing towns to be able to have a voice in significantly changing what their school looks like. I think that's important. I don't really know where that leaves us right now, because that's another conversation we would need to have. I think it's an important one for us to have, and I'm a little frustrated that that we're in a place where we're getting a lot of pressure to make decisions quickly without being able to have those conversations. And I also would say that I agree that it is our job to bring to the voters what we think is the best option. But I think we need to acknowledge how we, all of us, look at these sorts of decisions, primarily from our own perspective and our own experience and what we think is best for our own kid. And so I think it would take a lot of work for us to, I'd like to think that the folks that are feeling so strongly about their town having the right to make this decision would be feeling equally strongly about having really good conversations about what equity and opportunity look like throughout our district, regardless of what town you live in. And I think that would take a lot of work. And so I'm not saying it can't be done. But I think that's what I would want to see us do, to know that we're really providing the best programming and opportunity for all the people, whether their voice is at the poll or at the meeting or not. I wanted to clarify what I said earlier, because I think I read the chart wrong, so I apologize. I do appreciate the chart because it does help. I guess for me, it's to make the limited decision that I would be prepared to make, as just me personally as a board member, is to say something to the effect of sending all K through 6 students from one town to another town school for elementary education equals closure. So to me, that's clear, and I could vote on that. Beyond that, in terms of purposing, reconfiguration, those things, it's a little harder for me to think in the with the speculation without having more information. But I'm comfortable with saying that moving all students K through 6 to another school equals closure, and therefore requires a vote from that member town before that happens. That to me, I'm comfortable with at this point.
I just have a couple of points. I think to Dina's letter, I think that's great. However, I don't think anybody is necessarily trying to actually delegating responsibility, delegating authority to the towns. Instead, I think is what we are doing is just not exercising the authority we have. So we're not taking any kind of, I would not necessarily have to take an affirmative vote. We hereby delegate the authority to the towns to vote on whether we repurpose, or reconfigure, or close, or whatever. We just don't exercise any authority like that. As far as the I'm totally sympathetic. Tristan Sarah was saying, I mean, don't want to tie our hands, but it seems to me that we might be underestimating the wisdom of the voters. If there's a compelling case to be made that 6, 7, 8 should be together and not in 6th grade should not be in elementary school, then we make the case and let the community have their input, and having the families and the school system on the same page.
So we talk a lot about voters, and I assume, based on the positions of the discussion, that voters should be within a town, not district voters. And I think it becomes pretty important that make this more direct. Krista and Kristen were talking about equity issues across schools, across towns, great configurations across towns. All of a sudden, one of those things, one town decides what it wants to do in its town, and it's affecting 4 other towns. Potentially negative. I think we need to really be cognizant of whether that's the way the article is written. The town has the right to vote for closing its school. Closure, in my mind, is very narrow scope. When you start moving around pieces of the puzzle, then it all of a sudden becomes much of a wider impact than just the fact that you're stopping this.
This is just a side point, but if we did it alive? If you have a town vote on anything like what Sandy was suggesting, et cetera, that would be closure. It's also a property thing, so we need to be thoughtful of the fact that then we actually also are selling back the property. And it's not just school closure of students, it's school closure of building. I would say, or not, no school use of the building. Educational use.
I'll just add quickly that reminds me, one of the things that I think from the first time I read through the agreements, I'm not sure if it's stayed, I don't think it's in hours, is that if a building is closed, that it can't be used for educational purposes. And I think that puts, for 5 years, I think might be state law. And I don't know if that's relevant for us or if that holds true for this for the school closing in our district. If that is getting applied to our situation, I feel like that's problematic for New Haven because they have the stipulation they have to be used for education, and it feels like an overreach in that way because if it's theirs and they bought it back or we sold it back, and they're funding it, I don't see how we have any authority over what they do with it at that point. I mean, adult education or 0 through 5 child care education. So I think at that point, we just are completely out of this situation. So I was kind of wondering if that applied to our situation.
I was just looking at the articles list, and Article 9 is what was sent, I think, to the voters, in this section that talks about if the school closes. It talks about that the town, if it takes the building back, has to use it for community or some other purpose. Sorry, I just had it. It's not, doesn't exclude education, but it's clear that they're required to use it for community, whatever that is, and it doesn't limit it according to the articles. And then if they don't use it for the community for 5 years, then they have to give it back to the SD. So if they're obligated to use it for the community, and it seems to be broad enough to include education. Community.
Rob?
Can you hear me?
As best we can in what we've got here.
All right. I usually speak pretty loud. I'll try to speak even louder. I guess just a couple things. In regards to, I think people's trepidation to relinquish any type of power that the board may have to make decisions down the road. I think the power that our articles give us is the power to do what is right for our students. And if we know as a board what is right, we should go back to our owners. That is part of policy title 4.51, demonstrate loyalty to our ownership. And I think if that is grade reconfiguration, repurposing, again, we need to bring it back to the folks that gave us this power, the power to do right. And in regards to like the whole legal counsel and even the flow chart, like I don't need a flow chart or legal counsel to know what I know is right by the folks that put us in this position of power. What is right is to really go back to them and say, hey, this is a situation we're in. The science, the data supports why we want this X, Y, or Z, and please support this. And it shouldn't be a battle, because we should do our due diligence to make sure that folks understand why we're making the decisions that we're making. So I don't think we relinquish any power when we say, hey, if elementary education looks different than a K-6 experience, here's why, and it's up to you to make that decision, because we'll have done what we needed to do and explain why we're doing it. And that folks should just be an easy thumbs up affirmative to that. So I don't think we're relinquishing any power. And I'm sort of frustrated the fact that there's a conversation with our legal counsel outside of the board's purview in regards to the idea that the board has the power to repurpose also.
Before we became a district, who would the town vote on it? Like, so I went to Beaman. When I was there, it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 classrooms the whole time I was there. So did the town vote on those types of things, or was it just done by administration? Do you know?
Yeah, just by administration.
Okay. But at that time, there's a ton of kids, so I get that it's different now when you're grouping 3 classrooms versus just 1, 2s. But if it were, you know, that we needed to repurpose classrooms for that intention of moving kids together, I can understand how an administrative or whatever, just a board conversation could get that done. But when we're talking about drastically moving or radically changing kids' whole lives, moving them from one area to the next, that seems like an irresponsible thing for us to just assume that that's gonna happen well, without asking the town to say whether or not they feel like that's gonna happen. So I'm just gonna stand where I was before, after listening to everybody, that I still think that if we're radically changing the ability of kids to access education in their town, that it should be a town decision.
I was just wondering if, what's next? And maybe do we start with that statement and see where we're at consensus-wise on the radical change part? I don't know. I'm just trying to figure out how to move us forward, but I don't really know the answer.
I'm not sure how this works procedurally, but I'd like to offer a motion with specific language for us to discuss. And the language would be as follows. The board resolves that students' elementary education will be provided and maintained at the school located in which they reside until such time as the town votes to discontinue or change the scope of elementary education in its local school.
Is it possible to adjust the audio? It's hard to hear what's going on right now. And if people could identify themselves, that would be helpful.
We'll try to be better about speaking into the mic, but we don't have the camera system recording like we normally do. So we're having to make do with what we have in the room tonight.
Thank you. I'm Katina. Did anyone second that motion?
Not yet.
Rob seconds.
Okay, Rob, seconds. Discussion. I was chatting with Brad about this before the meeting. I like the sentiment behind the motion. It raises for me though, what does elementary education mean? There's always those ambiguous terms that can be interpreted in different ways. So I probably want more discussion about that. Separate from this, the motion that I said earlier that I'd be willing to entertain in terms of keeping it narrow to what I believe closure does mean, and then going from there is something that I would probably follow up on even after our vote on Brad's motion. And again, that motion would be sending all K through 6 students from a town school to another school in the district for elementary education equals closure. So that would be something I think we may have lost some. Are people still there on Zoom? We might have lost them.
I can still hear you.
We're still here.
We can hear you.
We can hear you.
Can you hear us now?
I'm still here.
Still here.
So this is saying, I'm not saying that I'm necessarily against the current motion, but I do intend on still trying to move forward with a motion that I think is more limited, just on what do I think closure does mean,
It's not missing.
and whether the board agrees, and then we can keep going from there.
Everybody else needs to mute. That's what the echo's about.
So, but the people in the room need the microphone because the people.
Yeah,
in
we
the
need
room
both,
can't hear
I
as well, so.
Who's got the microphone? All right. And I turned mine down, so, but I think they can see, ask if they want to test it.
I'm a good tester, I suppose, for this. I speak quietly. Hello. Can you hear? Can you hear on Zoom?
Yeah, but the video seems to be cut out.
Yes, that was a yes. Okay. Yeah, they'll be coming through here. I mean, I could hold this. Okay, like, so for me, I think in any of those situations, if all the students were moved somewhere else or something happened, that's out of the school, if they're moved to another school, there's another school impacted. And so I see that as still, I can't vote for that if it's just that town. I still feel like it has to be district-wide.
I can't support either motion for the rationale that I stated previously. And I know the comments were made that my comments were putting the horse before the cart and all that kind of stuff, but we are setting a precedence here. And by setting that precedence, it will be clung to by certain individuals that are advocating for town votes. And I firmly believe that we would be shutting the door to specifically this superintendent's proposal and being narrow-minded as to how we want to go about solving this issue.
So I can see Herb and Chris have their microphones still on.
So I feel like I could support Sandy's proposal, but not Brad's at this point.
Thank you. I think related to Brad's motion, just a scenario to think through and how it would be handled could be useful. So as I understood the motion, if the board wanted to say have sixth grade come to Mount Abe to form more of a middle school, like what Kristen mentioned, and each town had authority to decide whether that should or shouldn't happen, what would the board do if 3 towns say yes and 2 towns say no? Is that acceptable? Not acceptable? Because it gets tricky when we are dependent on 5 separate votes going the same way to achieve something. The chances of landing somewhere other than that are pretty good, and we would just need to be prepared to know what to do in that case.
Now I'm not sure what I've got Rob and Steve. So do you keep this?
Probably.
I don't know. We're gonna try this out. Steve, can you hear me?
Yes, yep.
Oh.
So
And
I think
phone.
that,
Do you want to choose to this one? Or maybe, but you can't really click him here. Steve?
can you hear me?
Yeah. Too loud?
Yeah, so I think that conundrum is kind of what I was struggling with when I was trying to figure out how to give folks a voice without necessarily having a battle of the towns in a vote. And to me, it always made sense to go back to the body that gave us the authority in the first place. Each town did not give us the authority. All of the towns together did. And that authority structure was thought out for a very long time. It was, there were informational meetings, and the voters voted on the way that these laws are set up as a group. And it always seemed to me that if we were going to try to be democratic about it and to try to give everybody a voice about whichever direction we're headed in, that it ought to be district-wide. And it could be that the vote by the district is to give each town a vote, but at least the district as a whole agreed to delegate that authority that way, not really from a body that was formed underneath this, formed by this agreement of the whole district, sort of giving authority back up the authority chain, and in a way that could be unpredictable. So that's why I've been sort of trying to grapple with how we get a district-wide vote to basically clarify this authority structure. And that way, whatever we do, we know we have the backing of our ownership.
Okay, thanks, Rob.
You hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I Steve, thank you for making that point. I do agree with Steve there. I sort of start to think about, like, it's a sixth graders, 7th graders and 8th graders possibly going to school in Virgins who makes that, that authority possibly. But I guess I'm still trying to figure out, and maybe Sandy and Brad can explain sort of, I guess, what the differences are between Sandy's proposed motion and the motion that we have on the table. If we could really sort of highlight those differences or similarities.
All right. I hope you all know this is a habit of mine, thinking flexibly.
Okay, so just to be clear, what I was proposing is I'm trying to see if we can make a decision today that's limited, and so we can at least take, in a sense, sort of baby steps towards where we'll be going when we get more information, which is why mine's more sort of, it doesn't exclude Brad's motion, but it's more limited. It's just simply that we as a board making a decision that sending all students from one town, K through 6, outside of their town, I guess whichever form it ends up going, whether to another town or multiple towns, that equals a closure of that town's school. Just starting there, because there are a lot of different permutations beyond that, there's so many that I can't even begin to see or figure out how to encompass that in a motion that we could pass maybe today. The other is I'm looking at the language of Act 46 that talks about school closure. I don't know if it addresses Steve's and Rob's concerns, and also Brad's to some extent, but in order for a school to be closed, if we deem a proposal means a school is closed, the board has to pass it and that member town has to pass it. So if it doesn't even get past us as a board, it doesn't happen. The proposed closure doesn't occur. So really it's just, we make a decision that it's a proposal and we want to do it and we say it's a closure. And then the next part happens. And then the next step occurs. And in that case, under Act 46, that's where a town says, are we okay with under my proposal, a K through 6 going outside of, all of them going outside of the town. My motion doesn't prevent that at this stage. It's just defining it as a closure and then what the next steps are. We haven't made that proposal. We haven't proposed at this point as a board or voted on anything. That's why we're still going through all of our proposals through Nate Levinson.
Yeah, I mean, I hear what you're saying, Sandy. I mean, one thing we could do, I mean, obviously we need actual language to vote on, to make it as specific as possible. Perhaps we could take the language that I presented and add at the end something like the following, that changing the scope of elementary education means moving K through 6 from one town to another, something like that, to include your limitation on what changing the scope might be.
Anyone else?
Okay. I still bring up the fact that while I am more inclined to agree with Sandy's version of this, the moment we ask a town, so we have decided we're gonna put pre-K all of a sudden in one school for everywhere, and then we don't, and that town votes and they say, yes, great, we'll close. Pre-K is not going there. So I just bring that up just because we really consider what closure, what the follow-up steps are before.
I guess it's sort of related to that. I'm just wondering if we get ourselves into a situation where we say all K through 6 students. So does that mean, like, so if we say sending all K through 6 students, if it's some of the K through 6 students, is it okay? Or like, do we get into an interpretation issue? The way that you suggested, Brad, adding it to your motion, is it too broad?
So I was gonna say this, which might seem unrelated, but not. And so let's go to time machine and pretend 7 years ago and we're a supervisory union. And what kind of discussion we'd be having now about schools getting smaller and towns having to bear the price for their students. So I just want to say that, a lot of people don't like that we've consolidated, but I think it has benefited in those ways too. So I don't know, I was just thinking about that these discussions would be Anyway, just wanted to put that out there.
I think that's actually, this is Sandy. I think that's a really good point, Kristen, because I've been thinking about that too, about how it used to be, before we became a unified district. And what I think is, if the same, let's say we had never unified and we were our old structure, the town of Lincoln or the town of Starksboro or the town of New Haven, whichever town, they would have had as a town the decision of, are we going to keep our school open because we only have 70 students, or are we going to decide that we may need to close and see if they can join, other schools and, work it out that way. But that would have been a town decision looking at the finances, and the town would have been, responsible for that. I think efforts being made by various towns is trying to be sensitive to the idea that other towns are supporting them, when really they don't even have the ability under our current method to pay more, even if they wanted to keep their school open, to account for what maybe other towns are doing, to support them. That's kind of been taken away from them. I think that also is why the town of Lincoln may have, attempting to leave, because they don't necessarily want to be a burden, on other towns just because they want to exercise certain education benefits for their town. So it's an interesting, I think it's a really interesting question. But it does make me think about how there was more local control, not just of your school, but also fiscally. So it is interesting how that's sugaring out.
Rob, do you have your hand up again?
I do.
1 second, we got it.
Yep.
Okay, go ahead. Can you
Oh,
hear
you
us,
got-
Rob?
We good?
Wait a minute, we got it.
Okay. Yeah, Kristen, I appreciate you bringing that up. And
Someone, let's see. Oh, I'm in safe driving mode somehow. Someone, so let me take it out of safe driving mode. Sorry. I don't know how that happened. So I do, my kids would know how to do this in 1 second. They'd be like, Mom, I don't see that I'm in safe driving mode.
That cars.
Yeah, I undid the car. Ani, where are you? You need to help me. Try it again. Try it again.
Try. Rob, can you hear?
yeah, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. I've been on the road the past couple of days. I don't know if having a phone on in a car could ever be considered safe driving mode. Watching the way some people drive. So I appreciate what Kristen, what you brought up, and also Andy, what you said. I've thought a lot about the whole idea of unification for our district, not having lived here prior to the district being unified. And it just seems we've gone down this path of unification, of top-down decision-making, and not bottom-up collaboration. I honestly feel that this should be a collaborative effort, that the opposite of division is not unification, it's collaboration. And so to go to this idea that, like, if we wanted to create a middle school, again, and if there are a couple towns that said, hey, we really like the looping that happens in our K-5 classroom, and that town decides we want to keep our 6th graders there, and as a board we go to them with all the science and all the data to why their 6th graders shouldn't be there. That's that town's decision. That puts the onus on them. And if the other 3 towns or other 4 towns want to have their 6th graders go down to a middle school at Mount A, then they go. I think that, again, like it's not, I don't think it's a slippery slope. It's on us as a board, in our articles of agreement. Elementary education was K6. We're going to alter that and change that. We need to go back to the towns. And if a town says, nope, not really into that, then we say, great, okay. And if the other towns are, then we say, great, okay. I just really feel that, I'm with Brad. I think the onus is on the board, and we don't have to decide, if a school is just kindergarten, if that's opened or closed, or if the board takes away, has that power. It's much simpler than that. So that's just where I stand, and it's been my reflections, and to Kristen's comment, I do really appreciate that, because I think we're doing ourselves a disservice when we think unification means top-down decision-making. This should be bottom-up, from our communities, from our classrooms, upwards, and that's truly the board representing and demonstrating loyalty to their ownership.
Okay, thank you, Brad.
Can I just say something? And I don't, as a parent, I don't know if I think that people in my town know best if my sixth grader should go to middle school or stay in elementary school. So I just want to add that, because none of us have gone to grad school and conferences, et cetera, et cetera. So I just wanted to add that parent perspective about what Rob just said. Anybody else? Did you guys have something?
I do. I
think it's been picked up.
Okay, so this is Sandy Lee, and I was going to propose a friendly amendment and talking with Brad to the motion. His currently reads, the board resolves that students' elementary education will be provided and maintained at the school located in the town in which they reside until such time as the town votes to discontinue or change the scope of elementary education in its local school. I am thinking to amend it to the board resolves that students K through 6 elementary education will be provided and maintained at the school located in the town in which they reside, and that moving all those students outside of that town will constitute a closure under Act 46. I think we could be saying. I just think we don't have to second it too, because we could just vote on the current one and I could just make a separate motion. I'm trying to blend the two, and I don't mean to be confusing it. So I'm trying to be respectful that this is a friendly amendment. So I can withdraw that unless if someone has any better language they want to propose.
I think in the end, reaching a consensus around the table, my understanding of Sandy's sort of limitation on the motion as it stands would simply be to insert the phrase K through 6 after the word students. So it would be the board resolves that students K through 6 elementary education will be provided and maintained at the school located in the town in which they reside until such time as the town votes to discontinue or change the scope of elementary education in its local school.
So let me go back. I don't think my proposal is inconsistent when I say that it needs a closure. It's trying to be clear about what Act 46, the Articles of Agreement say. It's saying if a school is closed, the SD board and the member town has to vote before it may happen. And the problem we're having, and that the issue that has come up, is what does closure mean? So I'm trying to limit it to the definition of closure, to be clear, as opposed to, I'm not trying to add any powers at this point. You know, the whole district voted that a school that is closed, the member town gets to vote and the SD board has to vote. And that was done back in 2017, 18, and everyone agreed to that. So I'm trying to keep to the authority that the whole district has agreed to, but what isn't decided is what does a closure mean? And it can be a very broad term, so I'm trying to be clear and limited to simply, if all K through 6 are moved from one town to another, it equals closure, so that it triggers the articles of agreement. That isn't to say that we can change that definition based on, or we can broaden it. So let's say the proposal is K through 4 in all schools and the other grades move. We still have the board probably have to decide, is that a closure? Is that not a closure? Do we only get to vote on it? Does the member town get to vote on it? We don't know yet because I don't know what the other proposals are.
Okay, so I think what I hear you saying is that your motion means if all K through 6 kids are moved.
Yes.
That is closure.
Yes, that's it.
Anything else
It's up.
is up in the air.
Right.
I think what I also heard you assuming, and I like your motion and I like the assumption, because you're saying we could come back when we see these proposals and say, well, this one's K4. We think that's a closure as well, or we might say, no, it's not. But to move us to this one step of all kids moving, that's a closure. That's what you're trying to get us to do.
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. And then there's people.
I think that the language needs to be really clear that it's mostly about Article 14 and doesn't include language that confuses Article 16 with Article 14 about school attendance versus closure, because I feel like this current motion actually does blur the lines between the two articles, and therefore I'm really uncomfortable with the closure piece of it being, or the town piece being embedded in it.
I'm not in the support of this to start with, but I'm very uncomfortable with all K to 6 because I still think that term is broad enough so that there could be a position made that if you touch my school and move one student against a town vote, that it won't fly. So I think you need to, I understand what the intent is, but there was a lot of intent with Article 16 that is all over the place now. So I think it needs to be really clear that it is a wholesale closure and it doesn't include any consideration of modifications that are less than that.
I'm gonna just state the obvious. Maybe it's not that obvious, but we have to vote anyway as a school board about closing. So I'm not really sure, and really talk about it. So I'm not really sure why we're actually having this conversation to just preemptively say where we stand about something that we don't know about yet. So I'm back to, there was a bunch of people that said this at the beginning, but I'm kind of back in that camp.
Okay, Steve, Rudy? Can you hear us, Steve?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Can't hear Steve.
Can you hear me?
You gotta talk louder, Steve.
Can you hear me?
No, not really. Oh, wait, I see why. There we go. Go ahead.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. Yeah, I think, and Patrick, you're not muted on this laptop, which is why I think there's an echo going on.
Oh, mute the laptop.
It is.
It is? Okay.
No, it doesn't appear to be in my screen.
Maybe get pushed. Okay.
So I think we also need to decide what this motion means legally. Are we proposing to amend Article 16? Are we proposing to amend Article 14? Are we proposing to add a new article to the Articles of Agreement? Or are we just making a resolution outside of the legal framework? And that's what we're going to abide by simply by making the statement in this meeting. Article 16 specifically talks about where kids should be taught. And if we're going to make a resolution to modify that, even if it's as simple as saying we want to modify Article 16 to provide a town vote at the end of Article 16, then it's an amendment to Article 16, which I think, because it's outside the warrant articles, we have the authority to do. We could simply amend Article 16 to say at the very end, if the board decides to proposes to do something contrary to the language of Article 16, it will ask for the permission of the town in which the children reside. That's another simple way to do it. And that way it's actually, taking a legal step affecting the legal articles that we're abiding by now. So I'm just curious where this motion lies in the legal framework once we make it.
There you go.
So it's not unusual that when articles are drafted, that there are areas of ambiguity. We don't have a definitions section that was made when the articles were provided. It didn't say closure equals this specifically, and it's under Article 10, which was given to the voters. Article 16 was not, but I would point out that but it does lend some help, but it does also say, it says the new SD board shall support and continue the elementary education of students at the school located in the town where they reside, unless such school is closed as provided above. So again, it goes back to what does it mean when a school is closed, right? And so again, there is no clear definition. So just like a judge is asked to define something when it's not in the statute, we as a board are like that body. We decide if there isn't anything clear, we can make a motion and say, this is what we believe closure to mean for our purposes, which is why I think we're here. I'm trying to keep it very limited because I think we need to keep things open for the work that we're going to be doing in the next few months. So again, I don't know if we can I don't know what it's called again when we call for vote under Robert's rules, but make a decision on Brad's call to question. But I'm happy to give this to somebody else at this point. And my friendly amendment was not seconded, so it's Brad's original motion.
Right. So let's go ahead and vote on Brad's original motions rather than try to build off of that. So the motion was the board resolves that students' elementary education will be provided and maintained at the school located in the town in which they reside until such time as the town votes to discontinue or change the scope of elementary education in its local school. All those in favor, please raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
So Steve, Rob, and Brad. So that's All those opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 opposed, so the motion does not carry. Sandy. Go slow so she can catch it.
So I move to define closure under Article 10 of the Articles of Agreement to include a decision to send all K through 6 students from a town school to a school outside of that member town. And I think that's it.
Second.
Somebody write it down because
I started to move it. I've got it.
You do? Okay. I did it in reverse order because I was trying to. So I move that that the meaning of closure under Article 10 of the Articles of Agreement under Act 46.
Decision. You want me
Is
to read it?
decision to send, or to include, thank you, to include the decision to send all K through 6 students from a town school to a school outside that member town. Something like that. No, it's I'm not moving to amend. Yeah. It's actually, it's Article 10 includes, I think, Article 14, so it depends on, it's what went to the voters. And it was the defining school closures in 2 places under the Articles of Agreement. So I just was looking at the Article 10 that was given to voters. It's under a certain section, I could be more clear. Thank you. 4, that's right. So Article 10, 4C, the section is defined as school closure. I'm not amending Article 10. I'm just saying that we as a board are defining closure that's referred to in Article 10, 4C to mean sending all students K through 6 from one town school to outside to schools outside of that member town.
Yep.
For their education, for their elementary school education. Sorry, I didn't write this down ahead of time.
All right, so we have a motion and a second and discussion.
So does this mean that if we get proposals and one of those proposals is asking or calling for that, that still wouldn't be it still wouldn't be a district-wide vote? Like it would hinge on just them and then the other 4 would vote together. I mean, if we're planning on putting whatever proposal we get, if we are thinking that we might put whatever we get or several things forward to the community to vote on, how does this fit in with that? If the town's not even getting their school back, and from what I feel like I'm absorbing for the first time tonight is that if a school was closed, that town would have financial, programmatic, all of the above control over that building. So I think if we're in it together and we're relying on each other and we've got to find solutions together, these are all district-wide decisions.
So I don't disagree that that there are district-wide concerns. I think, again, Article 10(4)(c) talks about school closure. So, if someone said, we're closing the school, we're closing the building for sure, let's not, let's like the very clear-cut view of closure, I think that no one would disagree with. Current Act 46 doesn't give it a district-wide question. The current language only says the SD board and the member town gets to vote on that. So it takes into account the sort of the fiscal issues for that town, because they have to decide, are we going to take responsibility of this school? Are we not? There's all the things that they're responsible for that is also discussed in the Articles of Agreement. What has been the reason I made this proposal and why this has been such an issue, I think, for the board is that it's not that clear-cut answer. I'm taking it one step forward to say, I do believe, though, that still sending all students K through 6, from a building outside the building should still be closure, and that still falls within us as an SD board. If that were proposed, we would have to agree to that, together with whatever the whole proposal is for the whole district, because that's our job as board members to look at the whole district. But then that member town, if that school is being closed, would have a vote, because it does affect them specifically. Now, I don't think that necessarily changes your concern for district-wide involvement. I think as a board, we may decide when we finally see a proposal that we think it should go completely district-wide, in addition to maybe each member town. I don't know. So it does leave that open. It doesn't foreclose that. At least I don't think it does.
Can you relate it how you have the property piece? Like if we're still as a district responsible for that property.
Well, if we propose to close it and the town agrees, to have it be closed, then the article actually talks about what happens to the real estate. It has all the conditions of what should happen. The town can pay $1 and take over all the responsibilities as long as they keep the building 5 years as a community public building.
A 0 through 6, if they're gone, that's saying, what is it saying? That there's no possibility for an innovation? Not that that's something I'm whatever, but like,
yep.
It's just saying that that's not possible at all. There is no, that's what Kevin, I think, was trying to say earlier. That
Well,
means that we as a board will not do an innovation center. Like, because we just want, there'll either be elementary students there or.
I realize that that's part of a proposal to make schools that don't have students who live there going to school there every day and turning it into an innovation center. But again, if the K through 6 students are elsewhere and they just occasionally go to the innovation center, this does define that as being a closure. And honestly, fiscally, if we looked at it as a board, I do wonder about why we as a board are taking all the students out of a building and still paying for a building without any option to give it back to the town. Because if we don't call it a closure, it doesn't go back. So but it takes that into account, I think.
The town could say, though, that they could use it for an innovation center. Say the town bought the building for $1 from the supervisor, whatever. And right, they could say that they could come use it as an innovation center. It doesn't take that off the table. The building can be used for almost anything for community stuff.
Right.
I just think it's important everybody's aware that that's what we're.
So once again, I'm going to oppose this motion. I'm still hung up on the fact that we are precluding flexibility and relying on a single town potentially to shape the focus or the future of the entire district. And I don't think it's equitable to subject the other 4 towns to what one town might vote.
I
just have a quick question, but if you don't mind. Is it possible to amend say the proposal said we're gonna close, just to use what was already put out there, the or 2 schools, whatever, and send them to other towns, and the town voted and said no, or there was a split decision or whatever, could it then go, could we amend what the process was after that so that there was other chances for people to vote? So because to Kevin and Sarah's point, like there are, you know, other people at play, and much like we went through the financials of what it looks like when Lincoln leaves, if that vote goes through to leave, I think people would be interested in what that looked like. Not saying that the towns don't have the right to vote on their position in that, but also respecting that other people have financial stakes in the game as well. So I wonder if there's a way to amend after a town has a vote, what the process looks like after that, so that it seems more like it's a group effort versus just one town dictating what it's going to look like from there on out. So I just wonder about that, the procedural part.
I think we'd have to get more information about that question. I'm not sure that we have the ability to answer it. Is that your volume?
Oh,
Oh.
someone online is, oh gosh, all right, let's see.
Steve.
There we go.
Yeah, so, I mean, I don't really want to be picky about the legal end of this, but I think if we're going to define, if we're going, I don't know if the board has the authority to create a definition within Article 10. We didn't create Article 10. How can we define what Article 10 says? The statute that controls whether something's in the warning or not specifically says if you're going to amend, and I would say making a new definition under an article is an amendment, that it has to go back to the district for a vote. So I struggle with that a little bit. And just in terms of this whole dynamic between the district and the local towns, again, I think it's, if we're all really pulling together the vote to redefine Article 10 or redefine Article 16, or to say simply maybe all towns will vote as a district on any of these proposals. You know, my preference would be to go back to the entire body.
Okay, thanks, Steve. We'll let Patrick go and then we will go to Rob.
Can I make a comment too? Sorry, my hand's up.
I don't know what.
Good.
This is Rob.
So just as I'm thinking about it, hearing this motion, I'll just sort of share how I understand it. So should this motion pass, the proposed action under item E doesn't stand. It contradicts that statement of staying open to all proposals, because this definition, immediately I think of 2 proposals at least that can't go forward with this definition. There are at least 2 proposals that take all of the K through 6 students in a building and put them somewhere else. And as I understand the Articles of Agreement, if that is how we define closure, should this board decide to close a building, it shall put it to a vote in that town. And if that town approves it, it shall be sold to the town for $1. And this board has no authority over what happens in that building anymore. And that comes after spending months and $100,000 to assess the proposals that are currently on the table, and the board has yet to see them in a side-by-side comparison.
Okay.
Hey, Don, can I?
Oh, yeah, just a minute, Rob. We're trying to get the sound back. Just a minute.
Thank you.
Okay,
All right, we're good.
try it now.
Got me?
Gotcha.
Okay, Patrick, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Were you done with your comment? I take that's a yes.
Yes.
Okay. I guess a couple things that I've been thinking about. I think going down the legal rabbit hole isn't really doing ourselves any favors right now. I agree with Patrick that it wouldn't take those proposals off the table by any means. It wouldn't. What it means is we as a board need to go back and sell it to our towns. A reminder, we formed the unified district not as a commingled vote of 5 towns, but by each individual town approving those articles of agreement. I think that's something that we have to remember. This was not a commingled vote to form Mount Abe Unified. It was each town voted up on those articles of agreement, with some towns being closer in that vote than others. This conversation might look a little bit different if a couple of those towns would have said no. And again, the legal rabbit hole isn't doing ourselves any favor, because this is all about trust. Our owners don't trust us right now. They think we are going to unilaterally make decisions for their towns under the premise that we have some authority that they didn't think we had. So I think we just need to reassure them that they can trust us. It's that simple. Let's stop chasing our tails here. This is just about trust. Let's tell the people you can trust us. Let's show that, please. Otherwise, I don't know why I'm here.
Okay, thank you, Rob.
1 second. Sorry. Let me get. Okay. There we go.
Yeah. I just want to acknowledge what I think you were expressing, Liz. And I think that this isn't just our district that's dealing with this. Edison Central is dealing with it as well. Edison Northwest, and there is a real rub between being a unified district and being a town thinking about your students in your kids in your town. And the reasons for Act 46 were way more about helping each other out for all of our kids in our neighboring towns coming to the same high school, and recognizing that we all share many programs and activities and sports, and all coming to the same high school and trying to work together to do that. But these conversations are going in the complete opposite direction of really distilling down to a town by town decision. And I just think that is really hard. It's really hard. It sort of negates the purpose of Act 46. It really stinks that we're in this position to have these conversations and be thinking about it. And clearly, nobody's figured out how to navigate this, because it's, when you think about how it's playing out in Ripton and with that district and with the State Board of Education, it is not an easy situation. And I think it's especially hard if you want to envision that we are, a community beyond just town boundaries. But these conversations really make it much more polarizing. I think it's unfortunate.
And what I want to follow up on is, I have in mind also what's happened in Ripton, the fact that the town of Lincoln has started the process, to leave, our district. And I really do feel strongly that that's an indicator for us that one of our towns felt so strongly about not having a vote and being disenfranchised from the decisions for their town under Act 46, that they took matters into their own hands. And I don't think Lincoln is alone. I think other towns are waiting to see what we do as a board, and they're waiting and they're seeing. And so when I make this motion, I'm making it in recognition that taking all the students from a school from Starksboro and sending those kids to Moncton and Bristol is closing the school. Taking all the kids K through 6 and sending them to, this is my opinion, and sending them to a different school and not having your kid go to school or get bused there regularly is in essence closing that school. And so it's recognizing what other people feel in those towns where that's proposed. I mean, one of the proposals that all the kids in Bristol, and I imagine they'll have a vote about this, all of their students go to outlying districts and that the other schools stay open, and then Bristol will have a say, you know, and that if that's the proposal that we as a board ultimately propose, because this boils down to, we as a board will make a proposal, presumably, and then we're gonna have to sell that proposal, whatever it is. I've spoken to people or looked at the community engagement input committee for Nate Levinson, and what came across really clearly is everyone feels very strongly that a certain amount of students from a town should be going to their town schools. You know, that's what those community input committee members were saying and giving that. And I'm not saying from here at the board, these were from the community that were appointed to this process with Nate Levinson. So I think we need to recognize that and just say, look, I'm not trying to foreclose a proposal, Patrick, because it doesn't really foreclose it. It just means people have a vote, but the whole picture has to make sense. And so, and if it makes sense and the town feels that it's right for everyone, I think we can make that. So I hear what you're saying, but at the same time, I think we just need, I'm going to still go forward with my motion and say, it's just closure means this. I don't think we're amending or adding it. It's just how as a board, we're going to go forward and we'll take steps as we go along. And we're going to have to decide whatever proposal we make, how we're going to roll that out. And I don't even know what that's going to be at this point because I'm still waiting.
And we had talked about how we might not go with one of the proposals as it is. We may take bits and pieces still, but that's not a finite process. And because it's late and I'm tired, if you think about the creation of a diamond, it's created from pressure. Let's create a diamond. Let's figure it out. We don't need to be wedded to our own ideas right now on November 15th, 2021. Let's keep looking at the information. Let's create something really great for our kids.
Yeah, just briefly, just want to follow up on Steve's comments. And, you know, I'm not sure where the language exactly stands on Sandy's proposal, but I think that thinking outside of the confines of Act 46 and Act 46 language is probably a good idea. What we're trying to do here is not to redefine Act 46 or reinterpret it or create a new article in it. What we're trying to do is more along the lines of what Rob said earlier. Number one, to do the right thing. And you know, and number two, provide assurances to the community, which where we have a high level of, I'm not sure it rises to the level of distrust, but I can't say that the community is fully supportive of everything the board and the administration is doing right now. And so our job is to provide some sort of assurance. If we remember, this whole conversation started with concern by folks in especially Lincoln and Starksboro about what constitutes a repurposing. So if we want to make an assurance to gain the collaboration and the goodwill of our of our clients, then maybe we just simplify it and say, well, we think that, and again, outside of any sort of mandate or constraints of the language of Article 46, we just say, well, we think that repurposing of a school constitutes a closure and be subject to a vote. Just keep it really simple.
Yeah, I actually appreciate the sentiment and agree with the intent. For me, it's trying to articulate what I see as a potential unintended consequence. And And should it go, so should, if we take the example of all of the students at Bristol being sort of dispersed out to other towns, that proposal didn't end there. There was another use of Bristol after that, which couldn't happen, because as I understand the articles, should a town vote to close its school, this board shall sell that building to that town for $1. At which point MAUSD no longer possesses the building and you have no control over what happens there. So that next step that would follow those K-6 students going somewhere else is no longer an option, because you no longer own the building and you have no control over what happens there. That's the unintended consequence. It's not so much that it gets put to a vote, it's that if the vote is yes, let's close the building, there are required steps in the Articles of Agreement. I don't think it's an option whether or not this board sells the building to the town for $1 if it puts it to a vote to the town and the vote is in the affirmative to close it. It's a requirement that this board then offer it to the town for $1. They might say no, in which case you still possess it. They might say yes, in which case you don't, and those next steps aren't an option any longer. That's for me the potential unintended consequence that is just important to know as you're thinking about this decision.
Any other discussion? Sounds like we need to vote. So the motion on the floor is to define closure under Article 10 of the Act 46 Articles of Agreement to include a decision that a decision to send all K-6 students from a town school to a school in another town for their elementary school education. Did I get it?
Yep.
All right, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye or raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Whoop. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All those opposed? 1, 2, 3. Okay, so the motion that was on the table passes. All right, keep moving along. Next action is around, oh, sorry. I believe we took action in our B, letter B, A turned into B. So we're now moving down to C, 2.0 global executive constraint. That's our policy, and that was added after the recent, we've been receiving a lot of email from community members, and some board members reached out wondering a way to how we could get a little deeper, and in a discussion with Val Gardner, we talked through that this may be the way to do it, 2.0 global executive constraints, and would involve giving some direction to our superintendent about the interpretation, or preparing an interpretation so that we could monitor the policy. Krista, I don't have my notes on that. Did I miss anything from our conversation?
Sorry.
All right. Kevin, I'll come.
I'm still really confused as what we were trying to do here.
Sorry, Kevin said he's confused about what we're trying to do here. So we had we've been getting a lot of email from people asking the board to take some action and do something. And because our governance process works through our policies, the best way for the board to approach that is to examine the policies that we have, because there are guiding factors. And since we look at policy and we direct the superintendent to take action or to do what the board wills, the best place to do is start with the policy, look at the policy, read it, and then begin our discussion from that point. Krista?
Sorry. Transitioning in my brain. But so we thought that this would be the best place for us to ask questions about, get more information from our administration, monitor in relation to the social, emotional, and behavioral health issues that we've been hearing about. And so within this policy, it addresses unlawful, unsafe, imprudent, and in violation of adopted policy. So it's a lot of that sort of captures many, if not all, of the things that we've been hearing about. And it seems like the place that this is where our work is, or at least one of the places where our work is. So if I understand correctly, Don, would we decide as a board whether we wanted to ask our superintendent to provide, so the next step would be, if we agree that this is where we can focus our energies, then we would ask our superintendent to provide their reasonable interpretation of this policy. We could decide to specifically focus on the safety component. And then we would ask for them to provide evidence in compliance or state whether we are compliant or not in that policy. Did I kind of frame how we would do this?
Yes, we first start with the directing to get an interpretation of that policy language. And when we first created the monitor, did the work for policy governance, that's how we started. We started with an interpretation. We looked at possible examples of evidence, evidence was outlined. And so then as a group, we went back and looked at the interpretation. Did we understand it? Was it clear? And then we could ask for the monitoring. Once that piece is, we could ask for a monitoring report on that. That would provide us with the information we needed. I'm going to start here and let it go down.
So this discussion, I think, it was in part prompted by an email I had sent down. I was sort of sounding out some ideas with her. But basically, when you have a bunch of teachers showing up with concerns in the classroom, and you have a bunch of parents showing up with concerns about safety with their kids, right? There's a lot of folks understandably upset. And so my concern on the board is, okay, so what is it that we're missing? Do we have a policy that doesn't exist that we need? Do we have a policy that we should be following but it's not? Do we have problems with interpretations that won't line up with what we're doing on the ground? Do we have problems with our monitoring process? Are we monitoring in the wrong kind of way? And I think connected to this policy is whether, are we in compliance, but what we hear from the community and what we hear from Patrick are two different things. And so some of what we may need also is under, I think, the policy number, but support and communication to the board. That there might be some information that we could get more of that helps us understand context that we may not have for us to say, oh, that sounds like we are in compliance. However, we're hearing about safety issues in the school. That brings up the safety issue in 2.0 or 2.1. And I also saw that in our in the last monitoring report, unsafe wasn't actually defined. And it looks like it was just sort of skipped over, probably inadvertently, but nevertheless. So those were the things I was thinking about as all these emails were coming in. I was like, okay, we have to look at this. What are we missing? And I think then Don rightly said, let's look at this executive limitations. And maybe we need more specifics from Patrick. Particular ways we want to monitor things on a different timeline. And I know we never really talk about direct inspection or third-party inspection, but maybe that's part of the conversation too.
Is this okay? So some of these policies we already do monitoring reports for. Are there some that we don't? Guess I'm clarifying. We monitor the whole thing, right? Okay, and all of these are board, I'm just clarifying for the audience. These are all board written or these are all superintendent written?
The board writes policy, the superintendent writes procedures.
Right. I have no other questions.
Do we write interpretation?
Do we write? Yeah, do we?
So for our
We-
monitoring reports, we wrote the interpretations.
We wrote the interpretations.
Right. The superintendent writes his interpretation of his A1 and A2.
A2, okay. Thank you.
There was more down that way.
Oh, I thought we were going to each person, sorry. So I had also, because there's been a lot of communication, to emails to the whole board, and I was trying to figure out how, as a board together to address the concerns that we've been seeing in an appropriate manner. So that was sort of my question. So I do appreciate this coming forward because I'm trying to figure out what's the appropriate way as a board member to address this. And so this helps. I'm looking at, I do, just as a process, I remember when Patrick first came on as the superintendent and, to his credit, when he was deciding the interpretation of his sections, I think A1 and A2, we had a policy governance committee. We met with Patrick and together, Patrick would pose some reasonable interpretations and he got board input on what, at least at that time, this is some years ago, he would get input about, oh, that sounds good, or maybe we were looking for this, or this is what we were thinking would be appropriate. And so I totally remember being at the superintendent's office, doing all of those meetings and working through that language with Patrick. And I know in earlier meetings, we talked about how it'd be a good idea maybe to get a committee up and running again so that we can work together with our superintendent to say, hey, this is sort of where things are moving. Should we be adjusting some of the interpretations? And in that way, I think we send a clearer message to our superintendent of what it is that what we're looking for. And then that way it's clear for him because then he knows as the board, okay, this is what my board is looking for when they're asking for information. And so that way it's a two-way communication. And I think that's the fairest way of going about that. And so I'm glad that this came up because I'd like to be able to, in a committee structure, figure out how can we address some serious concerns from the community and in a way that we can address that with Patrick so he knows, okay, this is the information and these are the channels that we as a board have agreed on address, what's in policy. So that's sort of my take historically of the process. And so I think there've been so many major things that we've had to deal with COVID, of course, and everything else. But when we get a chance, I definitely think it's worth setting up, considering doing a committee again, so that we can work together to make sure that we're communicating about what we need in a way that the superintendent knows, from us clearly.
So maybe I didn't word my first question comment. So this is an action item. And I don't believe we have a motion on the floor because we will need one. At this point, we're just discussing, as far as I know. That's fair?
That is fair.
Okay, thanks. Oh, how do I do that?
You gotta go around there.
Yes, I can only do it over there.
All right, stand-up meetings coming soon. All right. All right, there we go. Rob,
Okay, got me?
I think so.
All right, thanks. Yeah, I appreciate this this item on the agenda. I've been thinking, I've got the Patrick's report from 4/27/21, which deals specifically with this policy. And I think one thing I've always just struggled with as a board member is, we've got the superintendent's interpretation, and then there's the evidence. And so when you look broadly at 2.1, you know, with respect to interactions, you know, blah, 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 not blah, 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 but the evidence that's presented to us, at least under that big first sort of bullet point, are enrollment forms, parent-family handbooks, athletic handbook, communication with the board chair, and formal complaints at a state or federal level. When I read that entire policy, I don't understand how any of those actually are evidence that we're in compliance with that policy. I think they're parts of possible evidence. And I see that a lot with our monitoring reports. Is like, I would love to get a little more insight into why the superintendent considers that to be evidence that we're in compliance. I think it's just a huge void that we have in these monitoring reports. Is like, I mean, we can say whatever is evidence, but if we don't actually then close the loop on why it's evidence to the policy, and obviously to the point where, you know, where we're at right now in regards to the continual emails we get, unfortunately, man, I don't see how any of those pieces of evidence would support compliance at the moment. That's just the thought I've had. I think, you know, whether it's this policy or 2.8, which is communication and support to the board, I think, man, we could really do ourselves some favors if we had some third-party analysis, direct inspection, to make sure that our glasses aren't too rose-colored, and that we get some really good third-party, you know, data and thoughts and feedback. So I don't know if that's fitting to this conversation, but I just think that evidence piece just doesn't, I can't connect the dots personally. And I want to be able to, so I can go to the owners and say, here's why we're in compliance with this policy. Because I look through our policies and I would question if we're in compliance with the numerous policies right now, unfortunately, as we go about this fall semester.
We have a motion on the floor to discuss.
Sure.
There you go.
All right.
I turned it off.
Well, a motion might be to direct the superintendent to prepare an interpretation for 2.0 and show some examples of possible evidence, and for the board to review at our November 30th meeting. That might be a motion.
So moved.
All right, it's Krista and Sandy or Liz.
I'll move on that language.
So any discussion now? Kevin, did you? Now you're happy? All right. So
we didn't do it last or this year, but there is also the 360 report that we had gotten the year before. And I think it's just things were hard during COVID to get that kind of feedback, but there and things that were done in executive session for certain reasons, like, so I don't really know how to split this apart right now. So I guess I need help understanding that, but there was another way that we had to get direct feedback from staff, if I'm remembering correctly, sorry.
Yeah, I was wondering, Don, if you could walk us through, or maybe we discovered this together, how, I mean, it seems to me like with policy governance, you start out with these really big nesting bowls, and then they sometimes cover all the scenarios that you might encounter, but sometimes they don't. And then you start to become more narrow in your definitions and expectations. And so we're in a situation now where sounds like we're thinking we might want to revisit what our expectations are and work through those. And so I'm wondering, Don, if we act on this motion, then can you walk through the next step? So Patrick would come back with an interpretation. So I guess what I'm trying to figure out is, it seems important for us to have a chance to decide what compliance looks like, what evidence would we want to feel confident that Patrick and the organization is in compliance. And so can you help us to understand how we would walk through this process.
So I can speak to it as we did with the Policy Governance Committee. Patrick would write his interpretation, he would bring it back. The group would read through it, and if they had questions for clarity, they'd ask those questions. If they felt like a piece was missing, they might ask a question around, you know, how could we get to this, which I think is defined in this language. And so it was an ongoing conversation back and forth with Patrick about the interpretation. And then when we felt like we got that, and sometimes it was wordsmithing, like, do these words mean this? Is because that's what it means to me, or that's what it means to us, or so it was really clarifying the language. And I believe when we wrote it, we really tried to write it from, if somebody had never seen this and read this interpretation, would they be able to understand the policy language? Would it make sense? So we started with that. And then we might, through the conversation, come up with other, we might say, well, gee, some evidence to us might look like this, and we might talk through that, and Patrick, as our educational expert, might share a piece of information we didn't know about, a way to get evidence. So it really was a conversation that we worked through as a group. I'm gonna let pass it after you're done.
Okay. So Don, does it, I guess, I know that the community here is sort of the wonkiness of policy governance and sort of the slowness, and, you know, we're a big tanker ship that takes forever to make a turn. You know, so is it against policy governance to say, so Patrick, we're hearing this thing, right? And it's really kind of hard to put our finger on it. Can you provide us a monitoring report under 2.0 about this thing that we're concerned about by the next board meeting?
Yeah, that's what our motion was.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
I thought it was to create an interpretation.
Well, it has to start with the interpretation.
So I think when Patrick provides his report, it will be an interpretation, and then it'll be all at the same time, right?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and then we will hear the update, so we'll
Okay.
get the report, but we'll also have a chance to say, I think there's some things missing that would flesh this out more for us. So we can kind of do both things. We can make the policy more refined, which I think we're realizing we need to do, but we can also get the update that I think we want right now. At least that's the hope.
Yep.
Yeah.
I just want to call a question.
Vote. Ask you to vote. He's just asking.
I know,
I'm trying to see, where'd everybody? Rob, let me see if we can, where's your Rob? Let's see. All right, can you hear us, Rob?
Yeah. Just a clarifying question. Thanks, Krista, for your point. Could the board, I guess not define, but ask for certain lines of evidence to get back to my sort of point? You know, I think, like, looking again at the last monitoring report from 4/27/21, you know, it's one of the lines of evidence is formal complaints at the state or federal level. Could we ask for formal complaints at the district level? Would that be appropriate or not?
So right now, I think we're talking about 2.0, right this minute. If the board decided to go to 2.1, that would be another action. But right now, this is the umbrella policy over all of A2 is 2.0.
But either way, could we specify the kinds of evidence?
Yeah. Yeah, sorry, that was my question.
I think.
Oh, here's Rob, sorry.
So I think it's tricky. So Val used to say this thing, and I'm gonna go and tell her story. So Val used to say, imagine you're getting married and you're hiring a person to make your wedding cake. So this person is a world-renowned chef, but when you go to the chef and you say, use this flour, this sugar, this, and this, and then you don't get the world-renowned cake, it's because you went too narrow. So there has to be a balance of the request against allowing Patrick to hear what the board has to say and understand it and present in that way.
Want to add something to that?
Well, I was just thinking, I think we can get there where, I mean, it seems to me like we could say something like, you know, we want the evidence to include feedback from throughout the organization or something like that. Like our leader gets to decide if that's a 360 evaluation, if that's a this, if that's a that, am I right? But we can say we want to see
All sides.
you know, all stakeholder input, or you know, something that gets at what we're trying to get at, but gives some latitude into how it's obtained.
Do you want to see if Steve, do you just call?
Steve, I'm calling on you. Oh, okay.
Yeah, so one point that Rob reminded me that we sort of had talked about in the past was if you went back through the brown dog presentations, part of the monitoring report should include a rationale section. And I think that is a weak spot in a lot of our reports is we have an interpretation, we have some evidence, but we don't have the link that gets you from the beginning to the end. You know, what is the rationale for considering that evidence as you know, everything we need to make a decision. So I think that would be helpful to start with this one to get some rationale, you know, along with whatever Patrick feels is the appropriate evidence.
So are we talking about retroactive evidence or going forward evidence? Because what's already been presented by staff and community members, they don't feel yet has been addressed. So when we're talking about changing this, are we talking about changing it so we can retroactively go back and assess what happened as well as what happens going forward?
I don't know if this is what you're asking, so if it's not, then maybe Don can better answer, but what I was thinking was that I think it's important to be clear that this policy conversation is not meant to substitute for the update that we've asked Patrick about to be provided at our next meeting with some really specific things that, you know, I think he was going to be reporting back in on. So this is, I think it's to ensure that we are kept informed about what's happening now, but also that we are making sure that we have a more clear idea of what we want moving forward as well, so that, you know, where's our role in this, in what happened and what could happen again in the future. I don't know if I made that any more clear or worse.
So I think it is about more clarity moving forward. So we're looking at it all together. We're deciding, does it need a change, or is there some part that's not reasonable? And then looking forward, while we know those other things are happening to address concerns we've already heard.
It's quickly done. So all our monitoring reports have a look back, right? So we typically report out 1 year look back, right?
Yep.
So when we do this, when we ask Patrick, are we looking for in that action? We didn't include it in the action, but will we include a look back period?
He's gonna have to report whether we're compliant or not.
That's right.
So it
it's-
is going to be reflective on
So
up to
it is
this
going,
moment.
so it is going to look backwards.
So under these, you could say he was not compliant or
Correct.
whatever, and then going forward, you would say whatever the redefinition is.
Well, then you'd have to outline a plan, because if you report non-compliance, board or superintendent, the next step is you have to outline a plan to move towards compliance.
Yes, and that's where we have the accountability.
Right. And that's where we say, nope, that's not enough, or, okay, that addresses our concern.
So
Go.
in effect, I'm gonna use this word and its horrible consequence would automatically be a retroactive thing because the monitoring doesn't happen all the time.
Right, because it happens on a scheduled basis, so you're always looking back.
Put that in, about how often we examine this policy.
Right, there is a frequency timeline that we have on things, and we can we can change how often something is monitored, but we as a group have to decide it in order for it to happen. And so we can decide at any time to change the monitoring schedule or. Yeah.
Can you do that on a case by case thing, or it has to be, okay.
Well, I think that's what we're doing tonight. That was the other thing I was gonna say. We can have a schedule. We can also say, hey, this issue makes us think of this policy, and we're gonna ask, even though it was monitored in April, we're gonna ask for it to be looked at again.
Yes.
Yeah, right. Okay. All right.
I'm trying to go through all the monitoring reports and the policies. Not only just 2.0, but just to raise also some of the policies, including teacher treatment, which sort of includes safety and all those issues, possibly not just including 2.0, but maybe also addressing, I think it's 2.2.
Is the treatment of staff.
Right, treatment of staff. Even though the current interpretation doesn't talk specifically about safety, maybe something for us to consider for the superintendent to give us an updated report on that. I'm just putting that out there under the twos.
Oh, wait a minute. I think I took a picture of it. All right, any other board comment? Oh, we lost the screen. Oh. I'll have to go see if there's a hand on. I don't see any hands there. Well, I was going to ask you, I'll move to a vote, but would you like to hear from the public before we go to the vote, or would you like to wait till after?
I think this would be appropriate.
That's up to the board to decide. All right, go ahead.
Again, I didn't have any, Bill Mount from Bristol, by the way. I didn't have any written statements or anything. I've observed the meeting tonight. And one of the things that I've said from the beginning is I want to be a part of a solution. I want to find a way to help. I want to find a way to work together. Okay. Tonight, I heard from this board that your intention is to seek clarification and to ask for a monitoring report on the behavioral issues in our schools. We have a problem in our monitoring. Yeah, apparently, because a month ago, we talked about this and we were going to come up with a way to monitor. And I had said at that time, it needs to be done now. There's urgency, there's a fire burning, you need to take action now. Well, now we're talking about the same thing we talked about a month ago, getting monitoring to see the status of things. We're going on a month since that first meeting regarding the violent outburst at Bristol Elementary School. Since that time, there has been an altercation between two Mount Abraham students, resulting in serious medical attention for one of them. A reported and documented case of a sexual nature by a very young student to another without permission at BES, and another between Mount Abe students involving a reported systemic behavior by a Mount Abe student to another student, in particular in a very public and embarrassing event in this room during lunch. The reports are from many students that particular student that performed the act against another student had a quote unquote hit list, and the next day his target was a mentally challenged young person. Okay. Parents have yet to hear any clarification or implemented planning that would address the original two-day event, and certainly nothing to address these new events. In fact, you just tonight broached the topic of what compliance looks like and how we should monitor. I hear the word interpretation, interpretation, interpretation. I was in a job where people's lives were affected by rules and policies, and they're not subject to interpretation. They're subject to application. If you're talking about your interpretation of something, you either don't understand it or you don't want to understand it. Interpretations are very vague and very ambiguous and leave a lot of room. An application says that this sentence means what it says. You unintentionally proved my point with your clarification earlier tonight by saying this is what this means. All right? Now it's not open to interpretation, is it? So the last thing I'll say is what I believe and that others here must know is that we're doing, is what are we doing which will make our children more safe from predators and predatory behavior, not only from adults, but from their peers. Monitoring doesn't help these kids. It just reports what just happened. It doesn't get out in front of the problem. It doesn't identify people who need help. Obviously, a child who is performing these acts and doing these things does need help. But it is very possible that it's beyond the scope of what's available in the school. That's what I have to say. That's the help that I want to bring you. I want to focus you on what the problem is. The problem isn't monitoring. You know, they monitor how many people got killed in Iraq last year, but that doesn't help the dead guy. We need to know what you are going to do to help these kids who are having these problems. And oh, by the way, are causing other problems, serious problems for the other children in the school. Thank you.
You know what? Thank you. And I think we're doing both at the same time. So we have to do both at the same time because that's what our job is. So we're doing both.
All right, so our motion is to direct the superintendent to draft an interpret.
I just had to ask for clarification. I saw that we have an executive session anticipated. Is that not in the agenda?
That's just a placeholder. That's always on the agenda as a placeholder.
Okay, I thought that it was because we might in executive session learn things in executive session that we can't in public. So that's what I thought it was. That's why it was placed there.
No, it's always on there as anticipated in case something happens after the agenda has gone out that we have the placeholder. But it was not the plan tonight to have an executive session.
When we get there, can the motion be made though, since it's there in the agenda?
Well, it's not, we don't have this. we don't have the title and the reason, and we'd have to go through all that. So the motion was to direct the superintendent to prepare an interpretation for 2.0 global executive constraints with some ideas for possible evidence included, and to produce it at the November 30th meeting. All those in favor, please say aye or raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Any opposed? Any abstention? All right, motion passed. So next item is a discussion around policy 4.5, board member code of conduct, clarifying, when we originally put this on, it was to talk about clarifying understanding of individual rights versus group responsibility. There have been varying comments by board members to out in the community and at meetings, and it was just an opportunity for us to talk about how we really we really should speak to board action and to be aware of the fact that we can't discuss stuff in an email. The only time we can take any action is when we sit at a warned meeting together. And it was just mostly to have a conversation about our rules that govern our behavior.
I always struggle, I did when I was on the board before, and I still struggle today as I'm on the board this year, trying to figure out how to foster communication among board members while still abiding by, of course, open meetings laws. Am I correct that board members can meet and talk with each other just as long as there's not a quorum in a non-open meeting? Is that correct? Right, so for us, there are 13 of us, so you can't have more than 6.
Right, but I would caution you as to what it would look like to have 5 board members meeting, discussing board business out of sight of the public's eye. I would caution you about that.
No, I do understand that, and I understand the cautions as well, but what I'm saying is we as board members are not prevented from talking about issues to each other. And in fact, I mean, that's how business sort of gets done. It's just you can't make decisions, you can't it's not a board decision, of course, because that's in the board in an open meeting. Okay, so I just wanted to be clear about that. So, because what I find is emails are always in the day of open meetings, and emails is always challenging to me. And because we're all sort of separated and remote from each other because of COVID, quite honestly, it's sort of an interesting, dynamic, right? And how to communicate. So, if I send an email to the whole board, right? I haven't, but let's say I do. Am I doing something improper because I sent it to all other 12 members, not in an open meeting?
If a discussion ensues around board business, yes.
Okay, but if I just put something out there, but there's no board, like all reply, it's not. I'm just trying to be clear of the rules because I don't want to go afoul, open meetings.
So you should be really clear that your message is not to spur a discussion.
Right, like, so Brad sent an email to us that was, I'm not trying to spur a discussion, I'm just putting this out there before the next meeting.
Right.
That's appropriate.
As long as it's not a discussion, but the first time somebody replies all back to it to start a discussion, then we have the problem.
But you can reply just to that individual and it's just a discussion.
Right, and we often do that when somebody is working on a document and you need to send feedback, you send it back to one person.
Okay.
So just don't reply all.
The one I struggle with a little bit is talking out in the community, if you will, and having people understand that you are discussing your opinion as opposed to a board position. And, you know, I consciously try to preface, particularly in print, that is my opinion, not that of the board, but nonetheless, there is an influence that you recognize as a board member as well. So I think, you know, that can be a dicey situation where, particularly if you come across forceful enough that it sounds like you are representing the board, I guess.
Now may also be a good time to explain to everyone why we may not reply immediately to an email that we get as a board member, that we may want to and may have thoughts about, but if we could explain the reasoning for not doing so, that would probably also be good. And I feel like I can definitely post some more to Front Porch Forum of our approved information, because some things I believe have been done, and waiting lists at alternative programs, staffing shortages, and then just our accountability. Because no, we don't decide how it goes. However, we are looking at the facilities, and I think we have some accountability in that, all the accountability in that, because it affects the staffing shortages, it affects stability, it affects, you know, if you have 5, I'm like, well, if you have 5 after school programs running rather than 2 or 3 or whatever, then that's less staffing that could be elsewhere doing other things at other times, and it all comes out of the district budget. And so I'm not particularly wanting to advocate for a solution in particular. I'm not trying to do that right now, but I do feel like we also have some accountability for not just giving an ask, like we need. What's the give in return? Because we are spending the budget. It is getting spent, the amount of money that we have, and we may not be in charge of deciding. We are not in charge of deciding how it's all spent, but if we have an ask, where's our give? And anything that we actually, facilities is one thing that's in our purview, and it does matter what we do with that, and that could help make a difference. So I just wanted to connect that.
Liz, to speak to your comment about why when everybody gets an email, there isn't, why some people may not respond. It's in our process, we have outlined, we talk about that information in the policy says it goes through the chair. We have a communication plan that has branched off a little bit of that. So now we use a communication secretary and Krista as a community engagement chair. So now the 3 of us work together to get information out when something comes to the whole board. So it really helps everybody know by using our processes in place, and that way, you know, the message is coming from one voice, respective of board decisions. It's really hard when 13 individuals start responding to know that the message is clear and providing information in a way that people can receive it. So we do use that process now. And trying to share information if a response is out, getting it to people so that they know too. I don't know, Krista or Kristen, want to add anything?
Yeah, I had asked Dawn recently if she does reply to let us all know, because I've hesitated to reply myself. Just sort of understanding our process, and yet it's really hard when folks send you a note that's upsetting and you want to do something. And so I think it's important for all of us to know that Dawn is responding to everybody and what it is she's saying. And maybe there's a way we can, offer feedback to Dawn if we have questions about what was said, or we feel like other things would have been helpful. But I think it is important. And, with the community engagement committee, when we meet, I ask folks, okay, we're going to write our column. What are the things that are really important? Write them all down, put a draft together, and get feedback on that draft before sending it out. And I think that way everybody has a voice, but there's one message that goes out. And I think maybe we can continue that approach with emails that we get from community members. I was also thinking that maybe with the facilities work, we kept track of specific questions that came up and tried to respond to those in addition to board questions. So maybe that's something else we want to talk about if there's specific questions people have about what's happening and they aren't getting the information. So maybe we can do that. The other thing I just wanted to say, not related to that, is like bigger picture, contextually, it's just really hard for everybody right now. It's really hard to sit at this table. It's really hard to lead. It's really hard to be in the community and not know where your voice is. And so I feel like it's so more important now than any other time that we try to, I heard this expression and I'm probably going to get it wrong, but it was something like rush to kindness and walk really slowly to judgment. Because we're not going to have folks wanting to be on the board. We're not going to have folks wanting to be our superintendent. We're not going to have folks wanting to teach. We're not going to have folks wanting to do anything in the community because it's just really, really, really hard. We're all like at our wits' end. And so our conduct as board members, it's really important. It's really important how we conduct ourselves and try to work together with respect. We can totally disagree. We should disagree. We should ask hard questions of our leaders. But if we can't be respectful with one another, then I think, it's just going to make the work that much harder and fewer people are going to want to do it.
Here, here.
I'm trying to remember what I was going to say. I think it was roughly around the idea, like, so Sarah and I get an email from someone in New Haven because we're on the board from New Haven. And so is it the policy that we just forward that to you and then you respond? Because it looks kind of wonky. I mean, I understand our process, but folks in the community are like, so I emailed you and then the chair is responding, but that's how we're going about it.
That's how it worked in the past. If we were gonna change it, we were gonna have to look at what we've outlined as a guideline and then make changes, because part of our policy says we can change it at any time, but until we do, we adhere to what it is.
Okay, I guess maybe for a future agenda, if we don't have enough to do, that we think about ways in which we could respond, just at least, hey, I heard you, got the email, and we'll forward this on to you, but to not to just ghost people, just for being polite. So
I mean, in the past, people have said, put a little blurb and said, I'm gonna forward this on and let Dawn respond.
Okay.
So they might have added a little piece at the beginning and then just said, I'm gonna just forward this along to Dawn.
Okay.
All right, any other comments? Okay, moving.
So I was just going to say that,
Someone's, I think it's Steve.
Oh,
Like Steve.
I was just gonna say that,
I'll turn.
you know, a response like that, along with a little bit about the process, like, I'm gonna forward this on to Don because there may be some other folks with the same concerns and we want to, you know, address them all with a single voice.
Thanks, Steve. All right, the next, we have an action item to acknowledge board commitment to withhold judgment on specific proposals and remain committed to seriously considering all proposals. So since it's an action item, in order to take action, we need a motion. Krista, and then Andrew. All right, any discussion? I'm coming, Kevin.
Well, it might be semantics, but withhold judgment, does that put a gag order on any discussions, or are we gonna be at liberty to talk about them and then, but not say I recommend this one or I think this one's good and that's bad? So I'm just trying to figure out if this is a gag order or if it's just a judgmental thing.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Don, but I think that this was based on feedback from Nate Levinson and his conversations with the Community Engagement Committee and the Community Input Committee and proposal authors, and just sort of the desire that it would be a good idea for us to just let folks know that we're not just doing this process as a song and dance, but that we actually really do plan to invest a lot of conversation and discussion around all of the proposals in the report that he shares with us, and that we haven't come to any decisions at all.
I absolutely, I think we have to remain open-minded is another way, of saying the same thing as opposed to, withholding judgment. I have to say with this, I put my hand to my forehead because I know that we're waiting for more information, so I just want to express that I can't wait to get some substantive information, and I'm staying open-minded in the process. And I don't know if there's any updates of, when the next update will be from Nate. I know for very good reason it was delayed to get more input from the Community Input Committee, which I think is an important process. But absolutely, I think trying to keep open-minded is key, but would love, can't wait, I guess is what I'm saying.
I think that just coming onto the board, the senior going on is to remain open-minded. I'm not sure what the utility is of this particular motion, though.
Sorry.
Wrong hands.
No. Sorry. Snag tripped him on the way by.
I'm just wondering, I agree with Kevin about the language, not because I think it's a gag order, but because I'm wondering, how do you withhold judgment, but then seriously consider a proposal? It's confounding because you have to have a judgment in order to consider something. So it is a semantics thing for sure for me too, but for a different reason.
So Nate really was the guiding factor on this, because he said some of the comments he was hearing from the authors and the community members was that some of the statements being made by board members in public led people to believe that we had already made a decision. So that was the purpose, to put this on there, to say in front of everyone that we have not made a decision. We are waiting to be presented with all the information, and Nate felt like it might be a good step, in a good direction for our community to hear that we have not made a decision.
So can we just say that? And I think our discussion today shows that. And I have to say, partly because I'm so busy at work and doing stuff here, I haven't even paid any attention to that committee at all whatsoever. So whatever they pump out, I'm getting it first. I don't even know what the proposals are. So maybe that's dereliction of duty, but it's also just waiting for the process to fold out, which I've been talking about the whole time. And I know that, yeah, so, you know, people can guess what any of us are thinking about anything, but I won't use the entire thing about when you make an assumption, you make a whatever, but I mean, I just don't, yeah, I think people need to assume goodwill. And I think our discussion today shows that we don't have any, I mean, maybe individual people are leaning certain ways, that's human nature. And I don't know how we can avoid that, but anyway, assume goodwill. Thank you.
And then Steve, you want to?
Oh,
Steve.
do Steve, okay.
Steve?
Yeah, so I don't have any problem with the motion. I think it's pretty much the way I'm operating on it anyway. I just think, just a side note, those CIC videos are very helpful, and they may make a good point. I mean, I listened to some very interesting information that I hadn't gotten before by listening to those videos, and I thought they were very helpful, and I'm assuming there's going to be more information like that out that I haven't considered yet, so.
Okay.
So the motion was made to acknowledge board commitment to withhold judgment on specific proposals and remain committed to seriously considering all proposals. Well, then you have to vote this motion down.
Friendly amendment. I moved it. I'm happy to friendlify it. It sounds
So,
like it's a-
so acknowledge the board commitment to remain committed to seriously considering all proposals.
Yes.
Yes. I like that.
And Andrew, are you fine with that as a second?
Second, third, and fourth.
All right, all right. So with the friendly amendment, do you want to vote on the friendly amendment?
Sure.
Give me, all right, all those in favor of the friendly amendment?
Aye.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. All right, any opposed? All right. All right, so the motion is to acknowledge. You're abstaining, okay. All right. So the motion is to acknowledge the board commitment to remain committed to seriously considering all proposals. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. So, all right, Sandy, you asked about the executive session, and after I thought about it a minute, here's where we have a problem. The only time that we can alter the agenda of a meeting is right after it's called to order, and because we didn't do it then, under open meeting law, we can't alter it now, other than actions to table something that the board takes, but I can't add it in now because I didn't add it in at the beginning.
But it's there.
But it's not there.
Under Title I, VSA Section 313, in this case 7, for going into executive session. So Section 7 is to talk about academic records or suspension or discipline of students. I think discipline covers some of the concerns that have been raised by emails. I'd like to go into executive session, so matters that are public, as a board, we can be updated to be, I don't know, I want to be confident that things are being done. It's waiting for an interpretation, from my perspective, it can be a short update, and then I will also wait for the interpretation.
So I'm not sure, I'm gonna have to get clarification on this, so can we take a 5-minute break so I can?
Okay.
For a function break, and I can get some clarity?
Do you need any help?
Well,
Do you want to do
I
public?
can't.
We can't switch
I
that.
can't, yeah, so can we just wait?
5 minutes.
Take a 5-minute function break.
Okay.
Not to me today, I do think it's appropriate to have board council be present as well.
Okay, so we'll move down to public comment.
So Don,
What, sorry. somebody's
Steve,
talking. Oh, right.
Steve?
yeah, so you just turned the sound on just as you were finishing that sentence.
Oh,
That was my bad.
oh, that was, sorry. So, I was not able to get in touch with board council, so I'm not able to, we're not able to go into executive session because I can't get guidance on adding it at this point in the meeting, so Sandy just wants to be sure it gets added to a future agenda so that we can get information that we can't get in public session. Steve?
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
My button's broken, so I can, yeah, I'm cheap, I'm not buying a new case. There you go, just for that.
Hi, Shauna again from Bristol. I assume you guys kind of could figure out why I'm here, but what just happened just now is kind of how I feel is exactly the problem. Because me, as a member of the public, when I saw the placeholder on the agenda, I thought maybe that's my chance to be able to come and express something that I really, really need to talk to all of you about. But instead, it's all politics and this and that, and I don't even have a chance to talk about what I really need to talk about. I shouldn't have to come back. I should be able to say it now when it matters. And that is the problem. As a member of the public, it should be very clear how to get the help that you need. In schools, it should be very clear how kids can get the help that they need. Because I can tell you, it doesn't take any time to figure out that if you go on your websites to look for how do I get help with this, there is no way to do it. There's a talk of some point of a student conduct form. Is that available? No. Is there contact information for the person that you should file a complaint to? No, there's not. And as someone who has experienced childhood abuse, and I thankfully had somebody that stood up for me and got the people taken care of that should have been. And I know what it's like to be scared and to not know who to talk to. And that person that you report these things to, it should not be someone that is seen as an authoritative figure over you already. So as a child, to say, well, to report these things, you should go to this person, your principal, you're this, you're that, you're whatever. That's why people don't report these things, because they're scared. And I know it says, oh, well, you can't be retaliated against. That doesn't change the fact that it still happens. It doesn't change the fact that these people with interest in this can still decide whether or not to say anything, not legally, but they can. It should be someone that is someone that anyone in the community can go to if they feel there's an issue. It should be someone that does not have interest in it. It should be someone that is available and is seen as someone that you can trust and that is there and is not have any opinion either way. So the district coordinator, any peer councils, a resource, even just, somebody, not necessarily a counselor, but just someone that you could go to and say, hey, what are the resources that I have for this issue? And they can just provide them to you. They don't provide counsel, they don't provide anything except just giving you somewhere to go. Because right now, there's nowhere to go. And it shouldn't be this hard. It should be really, really easy, because I can tell you it wasn't easy. And thank goodness I have someone to stand up for me, because if not, then it wouldn't have ever gotten fixed. And that's how I feel now, is that if I'm not here right now and I still can't even say everything I want, then how is this going to get fixed? It should just be really, really clear how people solve problems, because you as board members don't have every ability. You can't just go make decisions on your own. And I know that. but I should also be able to feel like I can have a voice too and be able to find out how on earth do I even get my message to you? Because if it's this hard just to even get my message out, then how will it ever get fixed?
Talking to
You talk
this.
into the microphone and just keep that
Okay.
close by.
Herb Olson from Starksville. I want to take this opportunity to thank the board very much for the action they took on Sammy Lee's motion. It's a big weight off of my back. And I think it will be for other members, community members. So again, I appreciate that, from really the bottom of my heart. There's still a merger study committee. I understand, if things go wrong there, everything you said and wanted to have happen in terms of right to vote might go poof. In that process, depending on how it triggers out, we don't know. So, but that doesn't diminish my appreciation for what the board did tonight. Thank you very, very much.
See any hands on Zoom? Okay. Chris, do you have the evaluation up?
Yes.
Does the chair effectively establish the agenda and materials for distribution to the board, yes or no?
Yes.
Any comments?
I have a question.
Can I make a comment?
Just curious if I wanted you to think about having an executive session around this issue, because we had an executive session in October when we knew that there would be, important things that we need.
Not working.
Oh dear. Maybe it's out.
Okay, I'm just wondering why we didn't have an you know what my question is. I don't understand. I mean, I think it's really hard to be here and hear these things and not have any opportunity to get any info. And it puts board members in a really not a very nice position. And I don't know why we didn't have, why that wasn't thought about. And I'm frustrated by that.
Is the chair effective in fostering a professional
You
culture
guys hear
regarding
me?
fair and open deliberation, full participation of all members, and ensuring the integrity of the board process? Yes or no?
Yes.
Any comments?
Can you guys hear me? Hello?
Oh, we got a
My
comment.
computer. I was trying to make a comment on that last item. I apologize. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, just a sec. I don't think the, just a second, Rob. I think oh, wait, now it's green. All right, try that. Go
Sorry,
ahead, Rob.
I feel like the Verizon guy on television.
We got it.
Yeah, I echo Krista's comment from the last piece of feedback. And I think it's been something I've been chewing on for a while. I'll be honest, I normally have checked out during these feedback, and that's on me. But I think, when I look at the agenda, some of those, even tonight, like some of the points are pretty vague. And Dawn, I know at one point you had chair notes, and those really helped me because I think they helped maybe frame some of those really broad bullet points that are on the agenda as you move down. And I would just encourage you to continue those and add to them and things in the regards of like questions you should consider or ideas that you might want to have to bring to the table instead of just a bullet point and then run with it, guys. I think that's one of the reasons why our meetings drag on so long too. We could be better prepared heading into a meeting with the opportunity of already knowing maybe what we might ask or what we might say. And then bounce ideas off each other. Just a point.
And I would say that Dawn needs to get paid way more than she does. This is freaking ridiculous. And it needs to be a major raise because of the amount of work she's doing. And I agree that, you know, it just really is a pittance. So anyway.
I actually had a sort of a separate comment, just and I'm sorry, I'll send the form in, Dawn, on agenda recommendations so that we can give you more information. It was making me think it would be helpful maybe to have a section on just, you know, superintendent update, you know, just so that, you know, Patrick can give us highlights that he can share with us, you know, pros and cons. I want to hear the good and the bad. And I think there used to be, sometimes we would have that. It's just to give you a forum to give us updates. Looks like the battery's running low on the computer. I know, right? We're almost done. And I know it's challenging on the agenda piece and with the executive session. And I think hopefully we can fix that. You know, we can make that work. It's good that we're bringing it up. I think it died.
I think it died as well. Yeah.
So does that mean you can't hear me?
Oh, wait, I think we have. Steve, is that you?
That's me.
Okay.
I was actually going to say what Sandy said before she said it. I know at the Career Center, the director has a monthly report that he puts into the agenda just for information purposes. And I think it might give Patrick an opportunity to talk to the whole public about what's going on and what the response has been without having to do a monitoring report. He could basically give the whole community, including the board, an update on a monthly basis. That's what they do over at the Career Center. He writes a report and sends it out for everybody to look at informationally. You don't have to comment on it. You don't have to do anything with it. It's just there as a discussion item at the end of the agenda.
Other feedback to the chair?
Keep your chin up.
What went well with the meeting?
Really tackling hard issues and the board as a whole, you know, trying to deal with those hard issues.
Suggestions you have for, sorry, maybe not done. Suggestions for ways to improve future meetings. Yeah, I'm gonna say the same thing. Is there a motion to adjourn? Andrew? Kevin? All those in favor of adjourning at 9:46, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, thank you.